Namaste, Dhanavad Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are also paying our humble Dhanavad Pranam to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for providing us this wonderful commentary and translation of Bhagavatam. And following the guidance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we are praying to Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati has told us that unless we can understand something about Radharani within our study of Bhagavatam, then our study has been for waste. So we are continuing to read Bhagavatam in this mood, or this aspiration. Yadi sevā-vañcitāḥ yasyāḥ kṛpayā vayaṃ labhema sarvaṃ prāpnumaḥ prayojanaṃ dhāmni śrī-bhagavat pade Kṛṣṇa-sambandhi sarvaṃ Yadi jānīmahe tutam Aṣṭādaśasu sahasreṣu ślokānāṃ bhāgavat-oktiṣu radhāraṇim vindamā nishphalam bhagavat yayinam radhikaya kripam vina vyartasyat sarva-pariśramaḥ. If we are cheated out of serving that personality whose mercy awards us everything we need, including residence in the Lord's holy Dham and all things connected to Krishna, and if we cannot understand or discover Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, then our study of Srimad Bhagavatam has been pointless. Without the mercy of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī, all of our efforts are in vain. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our reading. Pranams Chirag Ji.
Namaste Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We're continuing today from Canto 5, Chapter 13, Text 5. Adrisya jili svana karna shula uluka vagbir vyatitantaratma apunya vrikshan shrayate kshudhardito marichito yanyabi dhavati kvachit. Wandering in the forest of the material world, the conditioned soul sometimes hears an invisible cricket making harsh sounds, and his ears become very much aggrieved. Sometimes his heart is pained by the sounds of owls, which are just like the harsh words of his enemies. Sometimes he takes shelter of a tree that has no fruits or flowers. He approaches such a tree due to his strong appetite, and thus he suffers. He would like to acquire water, but he is simply illusioned by a mirage, and he runs after it. Purport. In Srimad Bhagavatam it is said that the Bhagavat philosophy is meant for people who are completely free from envy. Paramo nirmat-sharanam. The material world is full of envious people. Even within one's inner circle, there is so much backbiting, and this is compared to the sound vibration of a cricket in the forest. One cannot see the cricket, but one bears its sounds, and thus becomes aggrieved. When one takes to Krishna consciousness, one always hears unpalatable words from relatives. This is the nature of the world. One cannot avoid mental distress due to the backbiting of envious people. Being very much aggrieved, sometimes one goes to a sinful person for help, but he has no means to help because he has no intelligence. Thus, the living entity is disappointed. This is like running after a mirage in the desert in an effort to find water. Such activities do not produce any tangible results. Due to being directed by the illusory energy, a conditioned soul suffers in so many ways. Text 6. Kvacidvitoya sarito biyati parasparam chalasate niranda asadya davam kvacid agnitapto nirvidyate kvacha yakshar. Sometimes the conditioned soul jumps into a shallow river, or being short of food grains, he goes to beg food from people who are not at all charitable. Sometimes he suffers from the burning heat of household life, which is like a forest fire. And sometimes he becomes sad to have his wealth, which is as dear as life, plundered by kings in the name of heavy income taxes. Purport. When one is hot due to the scorching sun, one sometimes jumps into a river to gain relief. However, if the river is almost dried up and the water is too shallow, one may break his bones by jumping in. The conditioned soul is always experiencing miserable conditions. Sometimes his efforts to get help from friends are exactly like jumping into a dry river. By such actions, he does not derive any benefit. He only breaks his bones. Sometimes, suffering from the shortage of food, one may go to a person who is neither able to give charity nor willing to do so. Sometimes one is stationed in household life, which is compared to a forest fire, samsara dava nalalidha loka. When a man is heavily taxed by the government, he becomes very sad. Heavy taxation obliges one to hide his income, but despite this endeavor, the government agents are often so vigilant and strong that they take all the money anyway, and the conditioned soul becomes very aggrieved. Thus, people are trying to become happy within the material world, but this is like trying to be happy in a forest fire. No one need go to the forest to set it ablaze. Fire takes place automatically. Similarly, no one wants to be unhappy in family life or worldly life, but by the laws of nature, unhappiness and distress are forced upon everyone. To become dependent on another's maintenance is very degrading. Therefore, according to the Vedic system, everyone should live independently. Only the Sudras are unable to live independently. They are obliged to serve someone for maintenance. It is said in the Shastras, Kalo Sudra Sambhava. In this age of Kali, everyone is dependent on another's mercy for the maintenance of the body. Therefore, everyone is classified as a Sudra. In the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that in Kali Yuga, the government will levy taxes without reciprocally benefiting the citizens. Anavristya vinanchanti durbhiksha karapidita. In this age, there will also be a shortage of rain. Therefore, a scarcity of food will arise. And the citizens will be very much harassed by government taxation. In this way, the citizens will abandon their attempts to lead a peaceful life and will leave their homes and hearths and go to the forest in sheer disappointment. Text 7. Surarhutasvakva cha nirvinacheta sochan vimhuyan upayati kashmalam kvachitcha gandharva puram pravishta pramodate nirvrita van muhurtam. Sometimes being defeated or plundered by a superior powerful agent, a living entity loses all his possessions. He then becomes very morose, and lamenting their loss, he sometimes becomes unconscious. Sometimes he imagines a great palatial city in which he desires to live happily with his family members and riches. He thinks himself fully satisfied if this is possible. But such so-called happiness continues only for a moment. Purport. The Gandharva Puram is very significant. The word Gandharva Puram is very significant in this verse. Sometimes in the forest a very big castle appears, and this is called a castle in the air. Actually, this castle does not exist anywhere but in one's imagination. This is called Gandharva Pura. In the material forest, the conditioned soul sometimes contemplates great castles and skyscrapers, and he wastes his energies for such things, hoping to live in them very peacefully with his family forever. However, the laws of nature do not allow this. When he enters such castles, he temporarily thinks that he is very happy, even though his happiness is impermanent. His happiness may last for a few years, but because the owner of the castle has to leave the castle at the time of death, everything is eventually lost. This is the way of worldly transactions. Such happiness is described by Vidyapati as the happiness one derives upon seeing a drop of water in the desert. The desert is heated by scorching sunshine, and if we want to reduce the desert temperature, we need huge amounts of water, millions and millions of gallons. What effect will one drop have? Certainly, water has value, but one drop of water cannot reduce the heat of the desert. In this material world, everyone is ambitious, but the heat is very scorching. What will an imaginary castle in the air do to help? Srila Vidyapati has therefore sung Tattala Shaikate Vari Bindu Sama Suttamita Ramani Samaje. The happiness of family life, friends, and society is compared to a drop of water in the scorching desert. The entire material world is busy trying to attain happiness because happiness is the prerogative of the living being. Unfortunately, due to falling in contact with the material world, the living entity simply struggles for existence. Even if one becomes happy for a while, a very powerful enemy may plunder everything. There are many instances in which big businessmen suddenly become paupers in the street. Yet the nature of material existence is such that foolish people are attracted to these transactions, and they forget the real business of self-realization. Text 8. Chalang kvachit kantaka sarkarangrir nagaru rukshor vimana ivaste pade bhyantara vaninardita kantumbika krujati vayaṃ. Sometimes the merchant in the forest wants to climb the hills and mountains, but due to insufficient footwear, his feet are pricked by small stone fragments and by thorns on the mountain. Being pricked by them, he becomes very aggrieved. Sometimes a person who is very attached to his family becomes overwhelmed with hunger, and due to his miserable condition, he becomes furious with his family members. Purport. The ambitious conditioned soul wants to be very happy in this material world with his family, but he is compared to a traveler in the forest who desires to climb a hill full of thorns and small stones. As stated in the previous verse, the happiness derived from society, friendship, and love is like a drop of water in the scorching heat of the desert. One may want to become very great and powerful in society, but this is like attempting to climb a hill full of thorns. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur compares one's family to high mountains. Becoming happy in their association is like a hungry man's endeavoring to climb a mountain full of thorns. Almost 99% of the population is unhappy in family life, despite all the attempts being made to satisfy the family members. In the Western countries, due to the dissatisfaction of family members, there is actually no family life. There are many cases of divorce, and out of dissatisfaction, the children leave the protection of their parents. Especially in this age of Kali, family life is being reduced. Everyone is becoming self-centered because that is the law of nature. Even if one has sufficient money to maintain a family, the situation is such that no one is happy in family life. Consequently, according to the Varnashram institution, one has to retire from family life in middle age. Panchasordvam vanam vrajet. One should voluntarily retire from family life at the age of 50 and go to Vrindavan or a forest. This is recommended by Srila Prahlad Maharaj in Bhagavatam 5.13.5. Tat sadhu manye sura varya dehinam sada samudvigna diyam asad grahat hitvatma patam griham andakupam vanam gato yadarim ashrayeta. There is no benefit in transferring from one forest to another. One must go to the Vrindavan forest and take shelter of Govinda. That will make one happy. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness is therefore constructing a Krishna Balaram temple to invite its members, as well as outsiders, to come and live peacefully in a spiritual atmosphere. That will help one become elevated to the transcendental world and return home back to Godhead. Another sentence in this verse is very significant. Kautumbika krudyate vayaṃ. When one's mind is disturbed in so many ways, he satisfies himself by becoming angry with his poor wife and children. The wife and children are naturally dependent on the father, but the father, being unable to maintain the family properly, becomes mentally distressed and therefore chastises the family members unnecessarily. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 12.2.9, Achinadhara dravina yasyanti giri kananam. Being disgusted with family life, one separates from the family by divorce or some other means. If one has to separate, why not separate willingly? Systematic separation is better than forced separation. Forced separation cannot make anyone happy, but mutual consent or by Vedic arrangement, one must separate from his family affairs at a certain age and fully depend on Krishna. This makes one's life successful. Text 9. Kvachinigirno jagarhina jano navaiti kinchid vipine pavida dashtasmasete kvacha dandasukar andonda kupe patitastamishre. The conditioned soul in the material forest is sometimes swallowed by a python or crushed. At such a time he is left lying in the forest like a dead person, devoid of consciousness and knowledge. Sometimes other poisonous snakes bite him. Being blind to his consciousness, he falls down into a dark well of hellish life with no hope of being rescued. Purport. When one becomes unconscious due to being bitten by a snake, one cannot understand what is taking place outside the body. This unconscious condition is the condition of deep sleep. Similarly, the conditioned soul is actually sleeping on the lap of the illusory energy. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung, Kota Nidra Yao Maya Pisa Chira Kole. O living entity, how long will you sleep in this condition on the lap of the illusory energy? People do not understand that they are actually sleeping in this material world, being devoid of knowledge of spiritual life. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore says, Enechi asaudhi maya nasi baralagi. Enechi asaudhi maya nasi baralagi. Harinama maha mantra lao tumi magi. I have brought medicine to awaken every living being from perpetual sleep. Please receive the holy name of the Lord. The Hare Krishna Maha Mantra the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and awaken. The Katha Upanishad 1.3.14 also says, Uttishta Jagrata Prapya Varan Nibodhata. O living entity, you are sleeping in this material world. Please get up and take advantage of your human form of life. The sleeping condition means loss of all knowledge. In Bhagavad Gita 2.69, it is also said, Yanisa sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti samyami. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled. Even in the higher planets, everyone is under the spell of the illusory energy. No one is really interested in the real values of life. The sleeping condition, called kala sarpa, the time factor, keeps the conditioned soul in a state of ignorance, and therefore pure consciousness is lost. In the forest, there are many blind wells, and if one falls down in one, there is no chance of being rescued. In a state of sleep, one remains perpetually bitten by some animals, especially snakes. So this ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 9 on Monday. Before we conclude today, were there any comments or questions or anything to share from the assembled devotees? This part of Canto 5 is, I think, very beneficial because in our modern society, the only thing that's promoted as the only option is family life. And family life is important. Obviously, any great sadhu in the whole history of the world, all of our acharyas have come from parents, have come from a family. So obviously family life is very important. But at the same time, to present becoming further entangled in family life, no matter what the conditions, the actual conditions of that family life are like, presenting that as the only option for our future is misleading, right? In our movies, in our music, we're only told about either going into family life or rejecting family life as a means for more self-centeredness, right? Like for young people, like being more promiscuous and not going into family life in order to pursue, like, right, more promiscuity, being single and exploiting the world from that perspective. And in that case, being in a family life is more beneficial because it's giving us some structure. We have to care about others. We're not just focused on ourselves. But beyond that structure of family life, right, we have these ancient cultures, especially the Veda, that are telling you can go inward because family life still keeps our consciousness external, right? To some extent, even if we're in a good family, to some extent, our consciousness is focused externally on, to some extent, satisfying family members, to acting in a way that's, favorable to peace among family members, right? So that's all our consciousness is externally absorbed, focused on those things. It takes time and energy away from directing our consciousness inward, focusing on who am I, what is my purpose on a spiritual level, right? Reading these these spiritual texts like Bhagavad Gita and really taking the time to meditate on what's being said and to go to a place like the Holy Dham to ask, to find someone who is more developed than us in these inquiries and practices and ask them, how can I make progress? Right? These are the things that are beyond family life. So not that family life is horrible, but it can definitely take our energy and time away from spiritual cultivation. It can fix our consciousness externally rather than going internally, and in some ways that can be crippling. So we're given these texts by Bharata, right, by Jaḍa Bharata in this case, trying to show that there are ways to develop in our life beyond family life. And in this day and age when that's like the highest aspiration is to have a good family life, is according to movies and music, it's very healthy to have these options presented to us through Bhagavatam. So I just wanted to conclude with that. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Tirtha Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai.
Jai.
All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees. Sama Bhaktiveda Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai, Sharkund Radhakund Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai, Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Princeton Bhakti Vedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari 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 Bo, Jai Śrīmatī Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai, Śrīmatī Tulsi Maharani Devi Dasi Ki Jai, Jai Bhakti Shivam Ki Jai, Jai Bhakti Charag Ki Jai, Hare Krishna.
Krishna Keshava Das Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Dhanyavad
Krishna.
Pranam.
Dhanyavad.